Good morning. I want in the time allotted to me to address 4 questions. The first one is, how unequal is our society? The second one is, does it matter? The third one is, if it does matter, how should our government respond? What should they do about it? And the last one is, what should we do about it? Now, I'm going to be talking mostly about income inequality, but I have to say that asset inequality is a much bigger problem. The poorest 20% of our households own about 1% of the assets in the country, whilst the richest 20% of households own an amazing 60%. Wow. But as you'll see from this slide, the income inequalities are just as shocking. Just as shocking. So the managing director of a large company can pay himself millions of pounds whilst paying his employees, on average, less than 1% of that. And it's getting worse. It's been getting worse, in fact, for about 40 years, as this graph of inequality shows. The Gini coefficient is a coefficient of inequality. And it's going to go on getting worse. And the reason we know that is a bombshell of a book by Thomas Piketty called Capitalism in the 21st Century has pointed out to us that what's actually happening is modern economies where the return on capital outpaces the advantages of growth means that the gap between rich and poor must continue to grow, will continue to grow inexorably, unless we do something quite radically about it. Does it matter? It matters like hell, because as Piketty himself points out, it will be unsustainable, that gap. It will threaten social cohesion. It will be incompatible with democracy as we understand it. No wonder that the head of the IMF, when she gave her talk in London about a year ago, picked out growth in inequality as one of the biggest challenges facing the developed economies. But it's not just the poor who suffer. This is a regression slide that shows the relationship between mental illness and inequality. They go together and we're at the top of both. But it's not just mental illness. This is from the book of The Spirit Level by Wilkinson and Pickett. And in that same book, you will find similar slides for all these. And the slope is in the same direction for all of them. The more unequal a society you are, the worse outcomes you have on these measures. So, what should government do about it? Well, here are 3 suggestions. I think they should levy more taxes, on the super rich, of course, but also on the comfortable of. The reality is that people like me should pay more tax. Out, but I've said it. The second is that they should begin to tax assets a great deal more, because it's the inequality in the ownership of assets that drives the inequality in income. And thirdly, they should join the other 11 countries that want to form a Tobin tax, a tax on the financial transactions, all financial transactions, including the thousands that go on between banks and are a kind of gambling game and confer no benefit on society at all. Well, the second thing I think they should do is make avoidance illegal. There is a huge avoidance industry. And they should set up some central authority that can look at schemes and say, if the primary purpose of this scheme is to avoid tax, then we, in our discretion, have the power to declare it null and void. That just cuts the Gordian knot on that huge and unhelpful industry. Now, I know it's been tried before, about 10 years ago, I think, and the government of the day withdrew under certain, I think, legal challenges at that time. All I'm saying is I think they should try again, and I think they should try harder. And the next thing that I think government should do is support the vulnerable in this situation. And you do that by strengthening the welfare state, not by decimating it. And you do that by recognizing that the vulnerable poor are not all shysters, are not all work shy, are not all trying to defraud the benefit system. That very large numbers of them are working parents in very poorly paid jobs, probably part-time, probably zero-hour jobs, scrambling to make ends meet, and whose children suffer really badly in their life's chances, their life's opportunities as a result of their parents' poverty. Too quickly. So, the first thing to do is don't hold your breath, because they're not going to do any of that, are they? With all political parties at the moment chasing the middle-class vote. So the question is, what should we do? Well, first of all, we should support the living wage. It's an excellent initiative, but it won't be enough. So what we should also do is recognize that huge income inequality is the result of thousands of unequal payment policies constructed by individual employers behind closed doors. What we should do is prise open those closed doors with a suitable wedge. And this is what a suitable wedge might look like. We should ask them to declare once a year in their annual accounts their 10% ratio. Very simple ratio between the income of the 10% highest paid and the 10% lowest paid employees. And the answer would look something like that, a single number, in this case 5. It's a very thin wedge, and so it might not resist being inserted too much. After all, it's a reasonable question for anyone to ask an employer, a director, a shareholder, a manager, particularly if others have volunteered it. It doesn't cost anything. We're not asking them to pay any more money or change any policy. It's trivially easy to calculate, even for a very large company. And it discloses no confidential information. Not one single salary is disclosed. But if we can begin to get it adopted, it could have an enormous amount of power. First adopters, of course, if we put pressure on, will be the ones with very equal payment policies. And they will wear their low scores as a badge of honor. And then other people might want to join the moral high ground with them. And eventually it'll become quite difficult for the ones with ridiculously high scores to stay out. They either wear that badge of dishonor, which their shareholders and staff and customers will disapprove of, or else they refuse to play the game, in which case that would just be a badge of dishonor of a different color. And because it's so innocuous to begin with, you may find that politicians and newspapers and pundits of all persuasions will be comfortable to support it. It is, after all, just more information, and they like information. And it could well be that the people of goodwill in the social media, recognizing this as a score with a moral hint to it, more than a hint, with a moral side to it, might join in and champion it, because the internet and the social media love a moral crusade. And if we begin to make it work, we begin to get adopters, we might then just push that wedge a little bit further in and ask for the 20% ratio as well, which means we'll have burst those doors wide open. The TUC would like both the 10% ratio and the 20% ratio to become compulsory, and we could help them to make it so. We could help to make it drift from desirable, voluntary, to good practice, to best practice, to required practice. And then it would have a great deal of power. The people in the top would not only wear it as a badge of honor, there would be a little bit of competition to have the lowest score, the highest badge, the biggest badge of honor. And the people at the bottom, now they're so exposed, would feel very uncomfortable. Many of them would want to scramble to get into the safety of the middle of the herd. And others would, at the very least, want to creep up from the bottom to a somewhat more acceptable position. So I think the effect of this could be to move thousands of payment policies just slightly away from inequality, just slightly away from the unfairness position. And that in total would be a huge effect. So what do we say to the captains of industry that if we now are not going to pay them as much, are going to go elsewhere? What we should say is goodbye, goodbye. The graveyards are full of indispensable people. And what do we say when people say that this is bound to have a negative impact on economic growth? We say, so what? Why should maximizing economic growth be the Holy Grail? This country is 5 times richer than when I was a child, and it's not noticeably or measurably happier. And some people will say, this is just unaffordably naive. It's much too radical. Well, I think we should say to that, unless something radical is done, this society will no longer go on being able to afford the benefits of capitalism, which are real, and the benefits of democracy as we understand it. Am I sure that this will work? No, I'm not sure. But in the 30 seconds that I see I have left, I just want to say, hey, it's sure worth a try. Thank you.